You can always spot fundamentalist kindergarten religion by the way it holds to law over love and to the way it cherry picks that law. The latest example is that old chestnut coming round again, that women shouldn't wear trousers or leggings because they're dressing like men. And yes, there is a rule in Deuteronomy 22:5 that says that men shouldn't wear women's clothing and women shouldn't wear men's clothing. Point one, they didn't wear trousers back then. We didn't wear trousers at all until about 300 years ago. So to say it's about trousers is really cutting the line a little bit too fiercely here. But if you're a Christian or you're a follower of Jesus, which is my absolute definition of a Christian, just worshipping him is a cop-out as far as I'm concerned, because he told us what we needed to do, which was to love. Jesus always interpreted law through love. The greatest of the commandments, love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, with all thy strength and all thy might, and thy neighbor as thyself. This is not a new commandment even from Jesus. He was just reiterating the deep truth within Torah. It's in Leviticus. Love God with all thy heart and all thy soul and all thy might. Hasn't got the fourth line in there, but that's okay. And thy neighbor as thyself. And Rabbi Hillel, the great and celebrated rabbi of the first century, also said that. And I quote, love thy neighbor as myself. That which is hateful to you, do not do to your neighbor. This is the whole of Torah. The rest is commentary. So that's what Jesus was summing up. The rest is commentary, anything other than love. And if you're going to go on about women not wearing men's clothes or men not wearing women's clothes, which a lot of kindergarten Christianity loves to do, you've got to hold to the whole of that Old Testament law. You can't cherry pick it. Now, Jesus said you interpret it through love, and that is how we have to look at these things. But the laws themselves were edited and added to in the old days. It's quite clear that the laws in Exodus and the laws in Deuteronomy and the laws in Numbers and the laws that are also scattered through the Hebrew Testament, a good 35% of them are edits added in by the priestly and Deuteronomical writers later on, possibly only about 400 or 500 years before Jesus came to live. So we have to look, what were the bases of these laws and how are we meant to adapt to them now? How do we interpret them through love? Well, to start with, you say, are they relevant today? Laws like you shall not eat the flesh of the pig or shellfish were incredibly sensible in those days because they didn't have refrigerators. They didn't have the cooking facilities that we do. They didn't have thermometers that could tell you whether meat was hot enough to be able to be eaten. And if you eat diseased or uncooked pork or shellfish, you can and may well die. So these laws were very, very sensible for a desert people. But many of them, including the abominations, which are punishable by death, are broken every day by your average human being who doesn't adhere heavily to the Jewish law. We work on the Sabbath. We are rude to our parents. We break oaths. We have tattoos. We mix our fibers. We wear cotton and linen together. We plant more than 2 seeds in a same plot of land, 2 different kinds of seeds in the same plot of land. We do so many things which those laws say we can't, because those laws in those days were relevant and even sensible. But Jesus came along and said, you don't have to keep them. You have to hold to love God, take care to love yourself, and then love your neighbor. And your neighbor is anyone next to you or near you. And I did say love yourself because to love your neighbor as yourself does imply that you have to have regard and respect for yourself. Not necessarily for your ego and your wonky bits, but for your true self. Because if you won't and cannot love yourself, you will project that self-hatred onto your neighbor. And that's what we see in the world now. Fundamentalist kindergarten religion always projects. It always says, you should not. It never comes back to I should or I should not. And to love yourself and to honor Jesus and to honor the law, you have to look right into your own heart and say, where do I do this? Where am I envious or jealous of other people who do this? Why do I need to berate the other instead of taking correct care of my behavior, my attitudes, and whether or not I love? Jesus was love personified. He came to fulfill the law by interpreting it through love. He also made it very clear that when he and his disciples were hungry, it was okay to pick grain on the Sabbath, which is a violation of law. But it was love for people who were hungry that made him violate that law. Interpret the law through love. That's a really good way to be a Christian. But you can't interpret that law through love unless you're open to the word of God in you today. Are you listening? And loving and honoring yourself so that you don't throw your rubbish onto everybody else.